Don't like it, not happy about it, because I appreciate her and what she has meant to me, what she has meant to the show, what she has meant to the network, what she's meant to the business.
Stephen A. Smith didn't just react when Molly Qerim walked out of ESPN. He went to war for her. He reportedly confronted the network's top executives directly, demanding that Molly finally get the money and respect she earned after years of carrying First Take on her shoulders. But this wasn't just about loyalty. It ripped the mask off how ESPN really treats its stars behind closed doors. The truth about this internal standoff is way uglier than anyone inside the building wants to admit. Molly's sudden disappearance didn't just shock fans, and it sent shockwaves through the entire company. This wasn't a quiet contract dispute or some peaceful transition. This was a full-blown meltdown that ESPN desperately tried to bury before the public caught wind of it.
Last night, she abruptly resigned as the host of the show. And to say that I'm quite sad about it is an understatement. Molly is a friend. Molly is a co-worker. Molly is somebody that I have leaned on many occasions in the past, as she has done when it comes to me. We've been partners on the show for the last 10 years. And a lot of times, some of these things happen, and it's just uncomfortable to see.
What went down was nothing short of a corporate power struggle. Egos, money, and control colliding at the top. Because when the woman who helped make First Take a daily phenomenon suddenly walks away, it's not just another TV exit. It's a red flag that something inside the machine has snapped. And while fans were left confused, Stephen A., ESPN's golden ticket, was reportedly behind the scenes, furious and unfiltered. He didn't just send a statement, he allegedly walked straight into the boardroom demanding answers, calling out the network's hypocrisy and double standards.
We don't get to define our own value. We don't get to define our own worth. We don't get to sit there and summarily say, this is who I am and this is what I'm going to do. And guess what? I don't give a damn what anybody say unless you have the leverage to do it.
People close to the situation claim Stephen put his own reputation on the line, something he's rarely done, and for Molly of all people. According to his own words, this wasn't some slow, well-planned goodbye. There were no confetti send-offs, no emotional farewells, just Molly walking out, cold and sudden. And in the brutal world of television, that kind of exit doesn't happen by accident. It means something went very, very wrong. Now, here's where things explode. Because Stephen A. Smith, the man cashing in $20 million a year from ESPN, suddenly started dropping lines that sounded way too personal to be random. His tone, his timing, his words, everything pointed straight at Molly Qerim. He kept trying to play innocent, saying, "I'm not talking about Molly." But come on, every rant he made about value, leverage, and knowing your worth hit like a direct shot at her situation. Those were the exact battles Molly was reportedly fighting ESPN over behind closed doors. Let's stop pretending. Stephen A. was absolutely talking about her. And the message wasn't subtle. It wasn't just a signal to Molly, it was a loud warning to the entire ESPN hierarchy. He wanted the bosses to know he wasn't backing down, even if it meant stirring up a storm on live television. The timing couldn't have been more suspicious.
The details, quite frankly, are none of y'all business. But it's not as if I know all the details. It was a contract negotiation that was going on. ESPN certainly did not want to lose her. But in the end, she made a decision to walk away from the show effective immediately. As you see from her Instagram post, her Instagram story last night, to be blunt, it came as a shock. I was not aware that this is something that she was contemplating doing. But in the end, she made her decision. And we have to move on as a show.
Right as rumors spread that Molly was being courted by ESPN's rival with a $2 million per year offer, Stephen A. jumped on air preaching about how you can't demand more money unless you've got leverage. That wasn't coincidence. That was pressure disguised as wisdom. Let's not forget, if anyone at ESPN holds real power, it's Stephen A. He's the face of the network, their biggest investment, the guy who drives ratings like nobody else. When he speaks, the executives listen, whether they like it or not. But instead of protecting Molly or handling things quietly, Stephen A. did something shocking. He went public, telling millions that Molly abruptly resigned. And just like that, he blew open the very controversy she was desperately trying to keep private.
But when you have negotiations and you're talking with people and you're going back and forth and you're hearing things that you may not want to hear or feeling things you may not want to feel, even though you're valued, even though people acknowledge those kind of things, we live in a world where we have to grow up.
That single statement from Stephen A. Smith blew up the internet. Fans couldn't believe what they just heard and instantly started asking the obvious question. If this was just about contracts, then why would Molly walk out immediately? Why not finish the season? Why not get the usual emotional farewell that every major host gets? Something didn't add up, and the deeper people looked, the messier it got. YouTube analysts, podcasters, and insiders started connecting the dots, and what they uncovered was pure chaos.
When you pay Stephen A. Smith $20 million, that means, okay, well, whoever his co-host is, they're going to want an exorbitant amount of money. And so she may have been making $2.5, $3 million as the host. Well, when Stephen A. is sitting there making 20, well, maybe now she wants to make 10.
On one side, ESPN's executives reportedly refused to meet Molly's contract demands, offering her way less than what she believed she had earned after nearly a decade of anchoring one of the network's top shows. On the other side, the man everyone thought would fight for her, Stephen A. Smith started sending mixed messages. Remember, this is the same Stephen A. who's bragged for years about going to bat for his colleagues in negotiations. But this time, he was suddenly talking about how we all answer to somebody, and how leverage only matters if you bring the numbers. Those weren't random words. They sounded like thinly veiled justifications for ESPN's actions. So what really happened? Was Stephen A. standing up for Molly, or quietly siding with the bosses to protect his own empire? Because insiders claim tension had already been brewing between them. Arguments over money, leverage, and who truly had the power inside First Take.
Molly is a friend. Molly is a co-worker. Molly is somebody that I have leaned on many occasions in the past, as she has done when it comes to me. We've been partners on the show for the last 10 years. And a lot of times, some of these things happen, and it's just uncomfortable to see.
And when ESPN allegedly offered Molly what insiders described as a disrespectful deal, far below what others like Malika Andrews and Mina Kimes were reportedly getting, that might have been the final spark that blew the whole thing apart. One commentator didn't sugarcoat it. That's the elephant in the room. Stephen A. Smith towers over ESPN's entire payroll. His paycheck doesn't just make headlines, it sets the standard. When one man is pulling in $20 million a year, it's only natural that every co-host around him starts questioning their own value and demanding more. But here's the problem. ESPN doesn't want to pay them. And that tension, according to insiders, might be exactly what pushed Molly Qerim to walk away.
We live in a world where we have to grow up. And again, I'm not talking about Molly here, but I'm watching, and I've been watching over the last several years, people in this business fall by the wayside because we forget that all of us ultimately answer to people. We don't get to define our own value. We don't get to define our own worth.
Now here's where the real expose begins. Stephen A. tried to play it off, saying Molly's departure was her story to tell. But when you step back and look at the pattern, something feels off. Just weeks before all this, he was publicly celebrating helping Shannon Sharpe land his ESPN deal, and us proudly talking about how he opened the door for him. He's vouched for countless people in the past, so why not for Molly, the woman who shared the First Take desk with him for nearly a decade? Was it because the executives told him to stay out of it? Or was it because deep down he wasn't willing to risk his own standing to go to war for her? That's the uncomfortable truth fans are starting to confront.
I don't like it, I'm not happy about it, because I appreciate her and what she has meant to me, what she has meant to the show, what she has meant to the network, what she's meant to the business. And I'm gonna miss her.
For once, the mask slipped, and Stephen A., the self-proclaimed king of sports media, looked trapped between loyalty to his co-host and loyalty to the corporate empire that made him rich. And look how it all played out. Molly's gone, Stephen A. stays, and the bosses keep winning. But here's the twist that most people missed. By turning her exit into a public conversation about contracts, Stephen A. may have accidentally admitted he did try to step in. Think about his words. We all answer to somebody, and you don't get to define your worth without leverage. So let's call it for what it is. You're basically saying you fought and lost, and that's the one truth ESPN never wanted out in the open. Because if Stephen A. Smith, their $20 million golden boy, couldn't secure fair pay and respect for Molly Qerim, what does that really say about the network's priorities? It screams that ESPN's leadership cares more about protecting their bottom line than honoring the people who built their empire brick by brick.
I appreciate her and what she has meant to me, what she has meant to the show, what she has meant to the network, what she's meant to the business. And I'm gonna miss her.
This is where the real story begins to unfold. Not just about contracts or egos, but about how far corporate power will go to silence anyone who challenges it. Stephen A.'s cryptic comments, Molly's sudden offers from rival networks, and those quiet whispers of betrayal behind closed doors, they all point to one conclusion: a war was fought inside ESPN, and only one person walked away from the wreckage. And let's not twist it, when the smoke cleared, Stephen A. was still standing tall in the studio, but Molly, she was gone. And that absence hit harder than any public statement ever could.
How do I make my bosses more money? How do I get some of it? I'm gonna repeat that. How do I get my bosses more money? How do I get some of it? Why do I say that? Because every one of us answer to somebody.
Her exit wasn't just another resignation. It was a spark that turned into a tidal wave, shaking the foundation of sports media itself. But here's the irony. The only person powerful enough to stop it all was Stephen A. Smith himself. Instead, he became the lightning rod, taking the full blast of backlash that followed. Think about it. For over a decade, Molly Qerim sat in that first take middle chair like a referee holding back a storm. She wasn't just there to ask questions. She kept the whole show from collapsing into chaos. Every time Stephen A. erupted with one of his legendary rants, she absorbed the blast. Every time Max Kellerman pushed too far, she pulled him back. Just enough to keep things sharp, not messy. Molly wasn't a background figure. She was the rhythm, the balance, the glue that made First Take work. Without her calm, quick instincts, that set would have been a circus. She gave the show its flow, the energy, the timing, the chemistry that made millions tune in every morning. And yet, when her contract came up, ESPN reportedly treated her like she was disposable. That's not rumor. Just look at how it all played out. If her exit had been peaceful, the network would have celebrated it like they always do. A tearful farewell, highlight reels, co-stars sharing memories, ratings gold. But instead, Molly vanished overnight. Her exit leaked before she even got the chance to speak for herself. No goodbye episode, no send-off, just silence. Until Stephen A. went on air and made it sound like it was her issue. That wasn't commentary, that was a lecture. And fans caught it instantly. Stephen A. wasn't defending Molly, he was defending ESPN's stance. The same man who built his empire on raw honesty and fearless opinions suddenly started talking like a corporate spokesman, and people noticed. Stephen A. Smith has made a career out of calling everyone out. Athletes, coaches, executives, nobody escapes his fire. But when it came to Molly Qerim, the tone changed. The edge was gone. The words were careful, the phrasing vague. Instead of his usual thunder, we got phrases like, "We all answer to somebody," and "You can't define your worth without leverage." Why so careful? Because by that point, insiders say he had already gone toe-to-toe with ESPN's bosses and lost. Reports started circling that when ESPN lowballed Molly in contract talks, Stephen A. tried to use his influence to push for better pay. But the executives, Bob Iger, Jimmy Pitaro, and the rest of the suits upstairs, wouldn't move an inch. To them, Stephen A. was already their $20 million investment, their ratings machine, their untouchable star. Molly? In their eyes, she was a moderator, not a moneymaker. And in corporate language, that's code for replaceable. So Stephen A. found himself cornered: push harder for Molly and risk his own leverage, or play the game and protect his empire. And based on what we saw on air, it's clear which route he took. He chose the latter. That's when fans started realizing something deeper was going on. Because this wasn't just about business. This was personal. By Stephen A.'s own admission, Molly wasn't just a coworker. She was his partner in that studio, his balance, his ally. She had his back through every storm, every viral moment, every on-air explosion. If that's really true, if Molly Qerim meant that much to Stephen A., then why didn't he use his $20 million leverage to secure her future? That's the question fans couldn't stop asking. It wasn't just viewers, podcasts, radio shows, and YouTube commentators all came for him, accusing Stephen A. of putting his brand before his co-host. One critic summed it up perfectly: "Don't chase clicks at the cost of the person who built your empire with you." And they weren't wrong. Because instead of defending Molly publicly, Stephen A. doubled down. He kept repeating the same line: "It's not my story to tell." But every time he said that, he dropped just enough details to keep the controversy alive. That's the Stephen A. playbook. Protect yourself while letting the chaos drive the ratings. But peel back the layers and it's clear this wasn't just about money. It was about respect. According to sources close to Molly, those ESPN contract talks weren't negotiations, they were insults. One insider described them as disrespectful, saying she was offered far less than what other network figures like Malika Andrews and Mina Kimes were reportedly earning. Imagine that for a second. Molly spent a decade keeping First Take together through every on-air blowup, every viral argument, every rotating co-host. She was there when Max Kellerman came and went. She steadied the show through ESPN's internal chaos, executive changes, and constant shakeups. She helped build the empire, and when her moment came to finally get what she was worth, the company treated her like a side note. That's not just poor management, it was a slap in the face. And then came the dagger. Reports started flying that ESPN's rivals wasted no time making their move. Sources say Fox Sports, Amazon, and even whispers from Netflix's rumored sports expansion all reached out, offering Molly Qerim multi-year deals worth millions. Everyone else seemed to recognize her value, except the very network she had dedicated nearly 2 decades to. That's why her exit wasn't slow or symbolic. It was instant. Molly didn't just walk away, she sprinted out of the building. Staying would have meant accepting less pay, less respect, and being forever overshadowed by a co-host making 10 times her salary. It wasn't just about leaving ESPN, it was about reclaiming her worth after years of being treated like a background piece to Stephen A.'s empire. Now, here's where the confrontation part comes in. Insiders claim Stephen A. did go to bat for her, but only up to a point. Reportedly, he went straight to the top, reminding ESPN's owners of her value and warning them about the terrible optics of letting her walk. Some even say he hinted that losing Molly could damage the entire First Take brand. But when the suits upstairs refused to budge, he folded. And that's where the contrast between Stephen A. Smith and someone like Charles Barkley becomes glaring. Barkley has openly said he's taken pay cuts just to keep his inside the NBA crew together because he understands something ESPN seems to forget. The chemistry is the product. Without it, the show falls apart. Stephen A. on the other hand, doesn't play that way. He's not sacrificing even a slice of that $20 million pie, not for anyone. So when he says, "we all answer to somebody," what he's really saying is, "I tried, but my bosses said no and I wasn't about to risk my deal for her." And that's the real tragedy of this whole saga, because let's not forget, Molly never planned her exit to explode like this. She didn't want chaos, she wanted fairness. Molly later posted online that she was disappointed. The news of her exit leaked before she even had the chance to control her own story. Yet, ironically, it was Stephen A. Smith himself who told millions of viewers that she had resigned. Whether he meant to or not, he became the face of her departure. And here's the brutal twist. The same man who's built his brand on loyalty, who's bragged for years about standing up for his colleagues and fighting for fairness, is now being accused of doing the very opposite. Fans are calling him out, saying he turned his back on one of his closest allies when she needed him most. So now the question everyone's asking, was Stephen A. wrong for protecting his own bag? Or was ESPN's machine so ruthless that even he couldn't save her? That's the debate raging across social media, with fans split right down the middle. Some say he betrayed Molly to protect his empire. Others say he fought and simply lost against a system too powerful to beat. But one thing's undeniable. This isn't just Molly versus ESPN. This is a mirror of how corporate America chews up talent, even the most loyal ones, when the math no longer works in their favor. It's a cold reminder that in the world of billion-dollar media, loyalty has an expiration date. And that's what makes this story so haunting. Because when the loudest voice in sports suddenly goes quiet during his co-host's downfall, people start to question everything he stands for. Fans aren't just disappointed, they're calling it one of the biggest betrayals in ESPN history. But here's the catch, this saga isn't over. Not even close. Because according to multiple insiders, the most shocking detail about what really happened behind those ESPN boardroom doors, the real truth about Stephen A.'s confrontation with the network's owners, still hasn't been revealed yet. And when the full truth finally comes out, you'll understand why Molly Qerim's exit might just mark the beginning of the end for ESPN's empire. It all started with one disrespectful contract, a deal so insulting that it didn't just push Molly away, it exposed the rot underneath the network's polished image. Sure, Stephen A. Smith might be ESPN's highest paid star, but here's the reality. He doesn't own the company. And when Molly's contract dispute suddenly exploded into a public resignation bombshell, Stephen A. was forced into a corner. Fight the bosses or play corporate soldier. From what insiders have pieced together, he tried to do both, and it blew up in his face. Let's rewind to the chaotic hours after Molly's departure. ESPN's executives thought they had everything under control. They believed she'd quietly walk away, Stephen A. would stay focused on his show, and within a week the headlines would fade. Simple, clean, contained. But that's not what happened, not even close. Instead, Stephen A. went on air, and rather than staying silent, he couldn't stop himself. He started talking about contracts, leverage, and bosses, all the things that were supposed to stay behind closed doors. That wasn't just commentary, that was Stephen A. airing out his own war with ESPN. Without spelling it out directly, he was sending a coded message to millions watching at home. I went to bat for Molly, but I don't sign the checks. It was subtle, but everyone caught it. The tone, the frustration, the defeat hiding behind his words. And that's where the tension exploded. Fans didn't see a man protecting his longtime co-host. They saw someone throwing her under the bus. Within hours, clips of Stephen A.'s comments were everywhere. YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, and the reaction was brutal. Analysts called his remarks bizarre, tone-deaf, even self-serving. Some accused him of rewriting the story to make it look like Molly walked away on her own terms, when in reality, she was pushed into a corner by the same company he represents. Others went further, saying Stephen A. was gaslighting the audience, framing Molly as ungrateful just for demanding the respect and pay she had earned. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get worse, the leaks began to surface, and they changed everything. Reports started dropping from multiple outlets revealing that ESPN had allegedly offered Molly a contract that was insultingly low compared to her peers. Insiders said she was furious, especially after learning that newer faces like Malika Andrews and Mina Kimes were being paid far more, despite having a fraction of her tenure and audience recognition. Meanwhile, rival networks didn't hesitate to make their move. Fox Sports and Amazon reportedly reached out almost immediately, offering her multi-year deals worth millions. One particularly explosive report even claimed Molly was already in talks for a $2 million per year contract, a number that completely dwarfed ESPN's so-called offer. So when Stephen A. went on air and said, "We don't get to define our own value," fans didn't hear wisdom, they heard confirmation. To them, it was proof that ESPN had lowballed Molly Qerim, that she finally stood up for herself, and instead of backing her, Stephen A. chose to side with the bosses. But behind the scenes, the situation was far more twisted than it looked. According to multiple insiders, Stephen A. did confront ESPN's top brass. He reportedly went to bat for Molly, arguing that after nearly a decade of loyalty and her crucial role in turning First Take into a sports media powerhouse, she deserved way more than what the network was offering. Still, ESPN's response was cold and calculated. Executives made it clear they saw moderators as replaceable parts. To drive that point home, they already had a short list of potential replacements ready before Molly even cleaned out her dressing room. The message was brutal but simple. Nobody is bigger than the brand. That left Stephen A. stuck in an impossible position. If he kept pushing for Molly, he risked angering his bosses and possibly jeopardizing his own $20 million deal. But if he stayed silent, he looked like a hypocrite, the man who preaches loyalty suddenly abandoning his own teammate. So he chose the middle ground, the corporate tightrope. Publicly, he praised Molly, calling her talented, professional, and a blessing to work with. Privately, he kept nudging ESPN's leadership to reconsider, but he never went far enough to truly shake the table. And in doing so, he ended up pleasing no one. Molly reportedly felt betrayed. Fans believed Stephen A. had sold out, and ESPN's executives were furious that he even brought contract talk to the airwaves in the first place. What was supposed to be a quiet behind-the-scenes negotiation had now become a PR nightmare. That's why Stephen A. suddenly switched gears, entering full-on damage control mode. He began releasing statements about his love and appreciation for Molly, talking about how much she meant to him in the show, all while carefully sidestepping any real accountability. But that didn't fix the optics. If anything, it made them worse. Because here was Stephen A. Smith, publicly admitting that Molly Qerim was the heart of First Take, that she meant everything to the show, while simultaneously standing by as she walked out the door. Fans immediately called out the hypocrisy. On forums, social media threads, and endless podcast debates, the narrative flipped fast. Stephen A. wasn't being seen as the loyal friend defending his co-host. He was being painted as the villain. One YouTube analyst put it bluntly: "If you really wanted her there, you'd have taken a pay cut. You'd have gone to the table and said, 'Take $1 million from me and give it to Molly.'" And that comparison stung, because it threw a direct spotlight on what Charles Barkley and the Inside the NBA crew have done for years, sacrificing personal gain to keep their on-air family together. Barkley's loyalty to his team is legendary, and it made Stephen A's situation look even colder by contrast. Instead of unity, Stephen looked like a man guarding his bag at all costs. Then came the wildest twist yet: speculation that Molly didn't just leave because of ESPN's lowball offers, but also to get away from Stephen A himself. Several commentators started whispering about tension between them that might have gone deeper than just business. One outlet didn't even try to be subtle, and it flat out asked, "Did Molly Qerim leave ESPN to get away from Stephen A. Smith?" Now, to be clear, there's no hard proof of personal conflict, but the timing, it was impossible to ignore. Just days before Molly's exit, Stephen A. had gone on air boasting about how he fought tooth and nail to help Shannon Sharpe secure his ESPN contract. Yet, when it came to Molly, the woman who'd shared the spotlight with him for a decade, that same fight never appeared. Not publicly, not passionately, not at all. And that's what made people question everything. Was this about money, or was it personal? Because if Stephen A. could move mountains for Shannon but not lift a finger for Molly, then maybe this was never just about contract, maybe it was about control. To Molly, that must have felt like the ultimate betrayal. And here's where the confrontation between Stephen A. Smith and ESPN's top brass took a whole new turn, one that exposed just how ugly things really got behind closed doors. According to multiple sources, Stephen A. actually did march into the boardroom, demanding that Molly Qerim be paid more. He used every ounce of his leverage as ESPN's biggest star, the man who drives their ratings and headlines day after day. But the executives, led by Bob Iger and Jimmy Pitaro, reportedly shut him down cold. Their message was ruthless but clear: "We pay you $20 million. That's where the money goes. Everyone else falls in line." That's the dark truth of corporate media. No matter how much power you think you have, there's always someone above you calling the shots. Stephen A. might be ESPN's most recognizable face, the network's cash cow. But when it comes to real authority, the suits upstairs run the show. And when push came to shove, they decided Molly wasn't worth the investment. That was it. End of discussion. So when Stephen A. later went on air saying, "We all answer to somebody," that wasn't random wisdom. That was a confession. He'd gone into that boardroom, tried to swing his influence, and got shut down. The king of sports talk met the limits of his own empire. And that's why this story hits so hard. Because this isn't just about a TV host walking off a set. It's about what happens when even ESPN's most powerful talent realizes their voice doesn't reach as far as they thought. And the fallout? It's still shaking the industry. Molly's massive offers from rival networks prove her value beyond doubt. Fox, Amazon, and Netflix all wanted what ESPN took for granted. Meanwhile, Stephen A.'s image has taken a serious hit. Fans see him differently now, not as the fearless truth-teller, but as the man who blinked when it mattered most. And ESPN? They've come out looking like a cold corporate machine that values profit over loyalty, optics over integrity, and control over creativity. But the most explosive part of all this hasn't even surfaced yet: the off-camera comments. Insiders claim Stephen A. said things privately that revealed just how frustrated, even furious, he'd become with ESPN's leadership. Comments that reportedly hinted his breaking point might be closer than anyone realizes. And when those details eventually come out, they could rewrite everything we think we know about Stephen A.'s relationship with ESPN. The power, the politics, and the price of silence. Because the clash over Molly Qerim didn't just shake First Take, it shook the foundation of the entire sports media world, and the man at the center of it all might never recover from the fallout. Stephen A. Smith is now facing questions he's never had to answer before, and for the first time in his career, the image of being untouchable is starting to crack. For years, Stephen A. has been the loudest voice in sports media, the fearless commentator who calls out athletes, coaches, and executives without hesitation. He's the face of ESPN, the man who built his empire on confidence, conviction, and control. But now, fans are asking the question he can't shout his way out of. When it came to protecting his own co-host, the woman he called his partner and friend, where did that loyalty go? Because in this case, the mask slipped. And suddenly, the so-called king of accountability looked like just another corporate player protecting his contract instead of his people. And then came Molly Qerim's swift rebound, the part that made Stephen A. look even worse. Within days of her resignation, the offers started pouring in. Fox Sports, Amazon Prime, even whispers of Netflix entering the sports talk space. They all wanted her. Everyone except ESPN seemed to recognize her worth. Why? Because while ESPN treated Molly like she was replaceable, other networks saw her for what she truly was, a proven on-air powerhouse with a loyal fan base and the composure to hold her own, next to the loudest voices in the game. One insider revealed she was being courted with a $2 million per year deal, nearly double what ESPN had reportedly offered during their so-called negotiations. That revelation painted ESPN in the worst possible light. To the public, it looked like the network that once defined sports talk was bleeding talent, not because stars wanted to leave, but because management refused to pay them fairly. The empire wasn't collapsing from competition. It was rotting from within. And Stephen A.'s role in that picture? Murky at best. On one hand, he continued praising Molly publicly, calling her one of the best in the business and saying she was irreplaceable to First Take. But those words from Stephen A. rang completely hollow, because they were coming from the same man who had all the leverage in the world to fight harder, and chose not to. The comparisons to Charles Barkley and his Inside the NBA team started flooding the internet again. Fans couldn't ignore it. They pointed out how Barkley and his TNT crew have spent years putting chemistry over cash. When contracts got tough, they didn't walk. They restructured. They took pay cuts. They fought to keep the family intact. And yet here was Stephen A. sitting on a $20 million throne, unable to close the financial gap that could have kept his co-host of 10 years by his side. The contrast was brutal, and the irony, it couldn't have been louder, because just weeks before Molly's exit, Stephen A. was publicly bragging about how he helped secure Shannon Sharpe's deal with ESPN, how he personally stepped up for his colleague, using his influence to make it happen. He boasted about being the guy who gets things done, but when Molly needed that same loyalty, that same fight, that same backbone, suddenly he was preaching about answering to somebody. It wasn't just hypocrisy, it was betrayal. Fans on forums, podcasts, and YouTube channels started saying the quiet part out loud. Maybe Molly didn't just leave because of money. Maybe she left because she didn't want to sit next to someone who claimed to be her partner, but when it mattered, chose the bosses. And that theory only grew stronger when new insider reports surfaced, claiming there was friction between Molly and Stephen A. in the final months before her resignation. No one could say for sure what caused it, whether it was contracts, creative control, or just a breakdown in personal chemistry. But the result was undeniable. Molly walked, Stephen A. stayed, and for the first time, fans stopped seeing him as the hero and started seeing him as the company man. But here's the twist ESPN never wanted you to know. Stephen A. didn't just roll over quietly. He reportedly went into those meetings swinging. Multiple sources claim he fought, argued, and pushed the limits of his authority trying to change the decision. But in the end, the executives still overruled him. And if you look back at his now infamous on-air rant about leverage and answering to somebody, it suddenly sounds less like a lecture. That wasn't just Stephen A. Smith giving some deep philosophical take. That was him admitting defeat. He tried to play hardball. He tried to flex his influence. But ESPN's owners reminded him of one brutal truth. No matter how big he gets, he still answers to them. And that's exactly what makes this entire saga so explosive. If ESPN's leadership is bold enough to tell their $20 million superstar no, what does that mean for everyone else under contract? It means the empire is starting to crack. ESPN isn't just losing Molly Qerim. They've been bleeding talent for years. Hosts, analysts, and commentators have been walking out left and right, frustrated by shrinking paychecks, suffocating contracts, and executives who only seem to care about cutting costs. The network's once untouchable image is collapsing under its own arrogance. They're slashing salaries, tightening budgets, and betting the house on a handful of star names. But in doing so, they're alienating the very people who built the ESPN brand from the ground up. And fans are noticing, big time. The online conversation has already shifted. It's no longer just, did Molly leave because of Stephen A? Now it's, is ESPN even sustainable anymore? Meanwhile, rival networks are circling like vultures. Fox, Amazon, Netflix, scooping up every disrespected host and every underpaid analyst ESPN lets slip away. These competitors are turning ESPN's mistakes into their opportunities, while the so-called worldwide leader in sports clings to a corporate system that values profit margins over people. And in the middle of this storm sits Stephen A. Smith, the face of ESPN, now damaged goods. His reputation as the loyal leader, fractured. His image as the voice of truth, tarnished. Because no matter how many times he insists it wasn't about Molly, fans don't buy it anymore. They saw the body language, they heard the tone, they connected the dots. So where does that leave Molly Qerim? Ironically, in a stronger position than ever, she's fielding offers, exploring new platforms, and proving that her name carries more power than the seat ESPN tried to chain her to. And for Stephen A., this moment is a permanent stain. No matter how much success Stephen A. Smith continues to stack up, he'll always carry one shadow: the fact that he let his co-host of 10 years walk away after a decade of loyalty and dedication. And for ESPN, this isn't just a scandal, it's a warning shot. Because if they were willing to underpay and undervalue someone like Molly Qerim, how long before the rest of their talent starts realizing they can do better elsewhere? How long before the so-called worldwide leader in sports starts crumbling under the weight of its own arrogance? Because here's the chilling truth. Stephen A's heated confrontation with the ESPN bosses wasn't a triumph. It was a reminder that even he, the face of the network, the man who's practically built its modern identity, still can't change the way ESPN does business. And if he can't change it, nobody can. Which means Molly's dramatic exit may not be the end of this saga, it could be the beginning of ESPN's slow downfall. But here's the part most fans haven't heard yet. Insiders claim that after those tense meetings with ESPN's top executives, Stephen A. left more frustrated than ever before. Off camera, he reportedly vented to his inner circle that he had never felt so powerless. Think about that. The loudest voice in sports media finally silenced, not by competition or controversy, but by the very system he helped keep alive. If that's true, then for the first time in his career, Stephen A. Smith, the man who's built an empire on controlling the narrative, is staring down a reality he can't shout his way out of. So now the question hangs in the air. If Stephen A. couldn't protect Molly, can he protect himself? And when ESPN's empire finally starts to crack from within, will he be the last man standing? Or the next one out the door? If you enjoyed watching this video, make sure to like, subscribe, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to know what you think about this entire situation. Do you believe Stephen A. tried to help Molly, or was he just protecting his own deal? Let us know. And as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.